Hi, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Zavalis, and I'm a medical doctor and intern at the Karolinska University Hospital and Karolinska Institute. Today, I'm presenting an analysis of Sweden's ethical review. I dare say for the first time, but I will add to our knowledge. That's an add-on. Given that ethical review is quite, local and varies across countries, I will try to set the scene for you. On the right-hand side, you have a map of Sweden with all the important sites, which is where all the committees for the ethical review are. People will send their application, and the application will go to any committee that is not located where they work. So generally, for safety, lots of researchers will send an amendment as soon as they change anything in their plan. And that's more just to be safe, to be on the legal side of things. In 2019, when it was centralized, the agency created a database to keep track of all these ethical review applications. But 2019 and 2020 had very troublesome data. So we had to filter that out. And from 2021 to 2023, they had good quality data. 22,000 applications in total, of which 1,500 were excluded due to being incomplete or having unpaid fees or being withdrawn applications. So we had about 20,000 applications that remained. Just looking at the sheer number of applications, it increased steadily over time from about 6,000 in 2021 to 8,000 approximately in 2023. We also looked at what type of applications came in, and from that we looked at the payment or fee categories. We see that about half of the submissions are amendments. So for 2023, that would be 5,000 applications that are amendments, or 4,000 applications that are amendments. In 2023, we saw a sharp rise of single, of randomized controlled trials, the drug trials, which we can't really explain, but we assume that it's seasonal variation. On the right-hand side, we have the percentage of applications where they come from. This data is highly, the classification is kind of problematic given the fact that many clinician scientists, they have both affiliations, both to the university and to the hospital. That is the region in our case. And then we have very few industry-sponsored trials or industry-led trials, but likely that is severely underreported given how industry-academia collaborations generally work. So at first decision, about 60 to 70% of applications were approved without any revisions. This share decreased a little bit over time, but it's still about 60%, 70. At first decision, 90% of amendments were approved, 50 to 60% of single and multi-institution studies, that is observational studies and can contain some RCTs that don't require any EMA authorization prior to starting. They're quite rare given that any drug that you give, you have to get EMA authorization. So that would be non-pharmacological interventions that are hidden in that group. We also saw that final approval rates were very high. We see a little bar that says, or the gray section of the bar plot is other, and that's about 8% that are where the ethical review board has said that this, ethical review does not apply here. So it's quite a big share where the researchers cannot figure it out. So I think, so these are the adjusted ones, removing the ones that where ethical review did not apply. We then constructed Kaplan-Meier curves for all applications, and we wanted to examine the share overdue at both first and final decision. The agency has aspirational deadlines for time to decision. It's 60 days for original applications. It's 35 days for amendments and 60 days for drug trials. The latter two, they're semi-legal deadlines set by the government and by law. However, the law does not specify whether or not it's calendar days or business days, and whether it's first or final decision. Now, together with the rest of the world, we consider calendar days to be the reasonable unit of time. We think final decision is the reasonable thing to regulate, given that that's when the research can commence and start. Looking at that measure, about 40% of originals, 25% of amendments, and 57% of drug trials exceed the statutory deadline. We tried to look at different explanatory variables, things that would explain away this increased lead time. And we found that the strongest predictor is actually the request for further information or request for revisions from the Ethical Review Board. One request, as we see in the Kaplan-Meier curves on the left-hand side, added about a meeting of 45 days, a little bit longer than the time between meetings for the ethical review boards. I mean, they need to have some time to prepare and everything, the researchers, and reapply. There's also a model where the chair makes a decision instead of a meeting, and then he just ratifies it at the next meeting. And we see that it saves about 10 days in the median. The lead times may not seem particularly dramatic, but I want to illustrate what they mean. So I want you to meet August. He's a Swedish Marie Curie postdoc. If he applies for a trial needing EMA authorization, a drug trial, long review times, plus high risk of revisions, that could consume months of his fellowship. Even without the EMA authorization, one ethical review revision could derail his entire timeline. And he just has 2 years. So he opts to study ethical review lead times, which does not need any ethical approval, actually. So I'm certain that these lead times that are known throughout the Swedish research environment, that they have an effect on what researchers, especially early career researchers, decide to study. So I think interventions should be considered, and different forms of interventions. We see that we have a group that are the amendments, where 90% are approved upon first decision. And maybe there should be another pathway. Maybe we should consider that maybe not all of them have to pass through the meeting. I'm trying to provoke here, but I also think that the randomized controlled trials should be focused more on. I think the sensitive data analysis, the reanalysis or analysis of existing data, the argument for ethical review is quite weak. It's about data integrity issues, and those are a structural problem. And ethicists are not the best, data integrity experts. So maybe we can skip some that are considered too low risk to assess. Maybe there should be other forms of institutional approvals for people that do data analysis and reanalysis of existing registry data. And maybe the trials should have, all of them should have an expedited process. It cannot take forever to start a trial. It should go faster, and it should be a more detailed and focused examination that can involve experts. Because with all these applications, with the sheer volume, we're drowning out the important studies where there's an actual tangible risk. The risk of harming somebody by an inadequate control arm, the risk of harming somebody with inadequate post-protocol therapy, with dosing schemes. So I think there are lots of things that can be considered, and I would hopefully see experimental studies that would try to change the current ethical review system, at least in Sweden. So I've provided some benchmarking data. I actually lied in the beginning. This is not the first publication of these results, because the Scandinavian agencies, many of them construct reports every year where they have data on the lead times and the different time to decisions. The only difference is that we cannot replicate their analysis when we have their raw data. So I think we want to collect further data from other Scandinavian countries that have these registries. And we want to build on this benchmarking data to kind of understand the process more, try to link different cases together. We have other data from the US that is limited to the VA system. We see about 80 to 110 days lead times, but of course, this comparison is quite flawed given the fact that the IRBs are very different from the centralized ethical review in Sweden. So anybody that knows of any good benchmarking data of ethical review boards, please talk to me about it. Thank you all for your attention and your time. Here on the left, we have the team. Gustav Nilsson is the principal investigator of the study. And we have Natasha Olsson and Lou Wahnström, are both medical students. I think Natasha is a doctor by now. And our funder, Vinnova. Thank you all for your time.
Okay, here at the first meeting.
Yes, Lawrence, Georgia State University. So how does the Swedish IRB handle less invasive studies like a chart review, 20 years? It's going to aggregate data, so it's all de-identified. Our IRBs do not require consent of those people. What, do they get, the studies like that get submitted to your IRB, and do you, because we call them expedited review. How do y'all handle those, not RCTs, given new drugs, get consent compared to these others?
The retrospective chart reviews are handled the same way.
I'm sorry.
They're handled the same way
They're
as the randomized controlled trials. So you send your application to the agency, and then you wait for a decision.
So if, like RCC, say, well, you've got to show us your consent form.
Hmm.
So we would just say not applicable. Is that how y'all do it? Because we don't do consents for chart reviews, reporting aggregate data. Is that how you would do it? Not applicable with this, not applicable for that?
I haven't done any retrospective chart review, but there are situations where you do not have to get the consent, but still, whenever you do any research on human health, you have to get an ethical approval. So you have to send it through the same system as everybody else.
Okay.
There's no expedited reviews. There was for COVID, but that maybe worked, maybe didn't work.
So is one of the hypotheses here is that you would like to have a different tracks for different types of research for the ethical review boards? I mean, that is true in the US systems, although I think for the US, there's lots of variations across institutions because the IRBs sit at the institutional level.
Yeah, I think given Malcolm's talk about the future of the journal article, I feel like ethical review and its future maybe needs to change, maybe needs to adapt. The sheer volume, the issues that we're facing now are kind of different from when we instituted the ethical review processes. So yes, maybe it is better to have institutional approvals for observational studies that are analyzing existing data, which is extremely common in Sweden given our good registries. The data has already been collected, and the only issue is whether or not there will be any leaks. And maybe ethicists are not the best people to ask for that. And I think randomized controlled trials, 57% of them being overdue, it's too slow, way too slow. And probably given all the entire volume of applications, they're drowned out by everything else that is low risk. So maybe the thing that is hidden in the fine print is not caught, and maybe not as much attention is given.
Yeah, it seems that at least in the US, part of the discussion here is about do you have the people with the right types of expertise reviewing the applications?
Yeah.
Are the structures and the standards that are demanded appropriate to the type of study?
Yeah.
And then how do you account for the variation across different institutions? Because a lot of this is very local, that sometimes local universities have figured out how to align appropriately, but it doesn't apply necessarily across the board. But it sounds like you have a single system.
We have a single system, and it's about 20 committees throughout the country. It's much smaller, the country as well. So, but I can only imagine the difficulty in getting people to review, these applications when there's so much noise in there that is low risk. Yeah.
But aligning reviews to the types of research, at least start to address that.
Yeah, they try to do that. We don't have the data on the people that have reviewed it, It's usually a committee that's set in stone, kind of, and they've predefined that they have specific specialties, but then they can call in other specialists for a specific meeting to get help.
Yes, it is an area that of much consternation, I think, in a lot of places. But I think disaggregating the data so that, because the fundamental problem, it seems, is aligning really where the expertise is with the types of risks that are associated with different types of studies, and then figuring out processes for that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.